Hey everybody, I'm Mark Schultz and I'm coming to Union City, Tennessee, August 18th at 7 p.m. at the Second Baptist Church. It's going to be a night of worship and testimony. I was adopted when I was 2 weeks old. My wife and I have since adopted 2 girls of our own, whose birth mothers also chose life for them, just like my birth mother did, largely because of a place like LifeBeat, the organization that I'm coming to help raise money. Their goal that night is to raise enough money to buy a mobile pregnancy unit that will deliver free pregnancy tests and ultrasounds throughout the Western Tennessee region. It's going to be a great night. I'm going to play some of my hits. I'm going to play some worship songs we can all sing along to. Plus, I'm going to tell you my story, which I know will inspire you to not only get involved with LifeBeat, but find a way to let other people know about it as well. General seating is $20, reserve seating is $30, and I love this. The VIP ticket is $60. You get front row, you get an encore performance with me, you get a Q&A, you get a photo, you get an autograph. I want to sign up for that thing. I can't wait to see you August 18th, 7 p.m., Second Baptist Church, Union City, Tennessee. It's going to be unbelievable.
Cool little promo video for you there. Good morning, everyone. So glad that you are here. You folks that are watching online, we're so glad to have y'all as well. I would like to welcome you. If you're our first-time guest, please make your way out to the Welcome Center before you leave. We have a gift for you, and you can connect with our volunteers about any type of church goings and things like that. If you are also new, we'd like to make you aware of several different things that we have available for you. We have a great kids ministry in the mornings. You can follow this orange hallway all the way down, meet volunteers that are in the back, and they can help your child get signed in and find their classes that is age appropriate. And that is babies through 5th grade. If you would like for them to go to our kids ministry this morning, we call that Crosswind Kids. Also, if you are a mother and you have your child or your baby here in the auditorium, that is 100% fine. But if you need any privacy during the service, feel free to make your way to a room here in the back of the auditorium to my right called the Mom Room. And so feel free to find some privacy back there during the service if you need to tend to your baby's needs. It's just for you. If you'd like to pray with any of our staff after immediately following the service, or if you have any questions, please feel free to go to our starting point room. It's back here to the left, or to my left rather, back of the auditorium. Our staff will be back there after the service. Would love to shake your hand. Would love to pray with you, answer any questions about anything that you heard this morning, or maybe anything else that you might have on your mind. If you'd like to give this morning, there's 3 different ways that we give here at Crosswind. We have a more traditional way, which is these wooden boxes on the back wall here or over in the kids ministry. You could also give on our website, or you can give on the app that we have for the church, the Crosswind Church app. If you and your spouse, one big announcement that's a little bit different, if you and your spouse are interested in what we call our marriage course, or the marriage course, we have that coming up. That launches Sunday, August 21st. So if y'all are interested in something like that, I've done one in the past with my wife. They're fantastic. If you're interested in that, please go and sign up on our app. And if you'd like more information today, you can actually stop by the starting point room, and we can give you a little bit more information today while you're here before you get on the app to sign up. But we would love for you and your spouse to join other folks here that either attend or are owners for our church in our marriage course. So feel free to join us on that and grow your marriage through biblical teaching. So again, thank y'all for being here, and let's stand and worship, please.
morning, everybody. How are we doing? We worship the God who was. We worship the God who is. We worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors. He parted the raging sea. My God, He holds the victory. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We sing to the God who heals. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause He hung up on that cross, then He rose up from that grave. My God, still rolling stones away. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. 'Cause we were the beggars, and now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, and now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. So let the house of the Lord sing praise. Come on, sing it up. We were the beggars.
Now we're royalty.
We were the prisoners.
Now we're running free.
We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. So let the house of the Lord sing praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place.
We won't be quiet.
We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. So we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh. God, I'm on my knees again. And God, I'm begging, please again. I need you. Oh, I need you. Walking down these desert roads, water for my thirsty soul. I need you. Oh, I need you.
Your forgiveness
It's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips,
like the sound of a symphony
to my ears.
It's like holy water on my skin. Dead man walking, slave to sin. I want to know about being born again. I need you. Oh God, I need you. So take me to the riverside. Take me under, baptize. I need you. Oh God, I need you. Oh, your forgiveness is like sweet, sweet honey on my lips,
Like
the sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin. On my skin. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want change. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me want change. I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. Oh, I don't wanna abuse your grace. God, I need it every day. It's the only thing that ever really makes me wanna change. Your forgiveness it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips, like the sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water, your forgiveness. Oh, it's like sweet, sweet honey on my lips,
like the
sound of a symphony to my ears. It's like holy water on my skin.
So pour it on us.
Like holy water on my
Pour
skin.
it on us, Lord.
Oh, it's like holy water.
Of the day and the night, holder of the sun in the sky. You command the waters and the wind. There's not one thing you're not greater than. Sing it out.
Greater than the mountain that's in front of me.
You are greater, so much greater, greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater. Full over all of my days, God above the storms that I face. My hope is in your name and nothing less. There's not one thing you're not greater than. Greater than the mountain that's in front of me. You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater. No guilt, no shame, no sin, no stain is greater than the great I am. No fear, no grave, no other name is greater than the great I am. No guilt, no shame, no sin, no stain is greater than, oh my great I am. No fear, no grave, no other name is greater than the great I am. No guilt, no shame, no sin, no stain is greater than the great I am. No fear, no grave, no other name is greater than the great I am. Greater than the mountain that's in front of me. You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater.
Greater than the mountain that's in front of me.
You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the mountain that's in front of me. You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater. No guilt, no shame, no sin, no stain is greater than the great I am. No fear, no grave, no other name is greater than the great I am. Greater than the mountain that's in front of me. You are greater, so much greater. Greater than the power of the enemy. You are greater, so much greater. Oh, you're so much greater. God, we thank you that you are greater. God, you're greater than anything we can imagine, anything that we could create, God, anything that we could design. Lord, you're greater than any of our circumstances. Lord, we just want to say thank you for being great in our lives. Continue to show us who you are. We want to teach you guys a new song today. We're going to play it just a little bit soft, just like this. But it's based off of this verse in Romans chapter 12. It says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." A lot of times we associate worship with what we're doing right now. And that's not necessarily wrong, but it's not always true. Worship is our life. It's a life lived in proper view of who God is. And this scripture here tells us that we're supposed to be dead to the world and alive to God. And so this next song is called "On the Altar." And I love the chorus of it because it says, "You are worth what you asked for." God is worth our entire life.
Sweetest fragrance, wholly yours, consecrated for only you, Lord, just for you, Lord, 'cause I'm your temple, a dwelling place for and Lord, make my heart a pleasing home for you. And oh, I will live on the altar. And oh, you are worth what you ask for. If you're searching for a heart as your reward, then I am yours. In your house I will daily live, fixed on one thing, to see your beauty. You alone are worth more than gold. I'll trade the whole world for a day at your courts, 'cause I'm your temple, a dwelling place for you. And Lord, make my heart a pleasing home for you. And oh, I will you're searching for a heart as your reward, then I am yours. I wanna be the oil. I wanna be the sacrifice. I wanna be the laid down lover all my life. I wanna be the oil. I wanna be the sacrifice. I wanna be the laid down lover all my life. I wanna be the oil. I wanna be the sacrifice. I wanna be the laid down lover all my life. I wanna be the oil. I wanna be the sacrifice. I wanna be the laid down lover all my life. I will live on the altar and know you are worth what you ask for. And know I will live on the altar and know you are worth what you ask
If you're
for.
searching,
If you're searching for a heart as your reward, if you're searching for a heart as your reward, if you're searching for a heart as your reward, then I am yours. I am yours.
God, we give you all of our hearts, all of our minds, all of our strength. Help us to love you with everything we've got. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeremy, and I'm the pastor here at Crosswind Church. I'm so thankful that you're joining us this morning for worship, whether you're here in the auditorium, whether you're watching online. You picked a great week, a great time to kind of join in with us. We're starting a brand new sermon series called Right in the Eye, and I'm super pumped about it and a little bit nervous, just to be honest with you, because if you're new to Crosswind, let me kind of tell you what we do. We pick a subject we want to talk about, and then we talk about it until we're done talking about it, and then we pick another subject and we move on and we talk about that. And today I get to talk to you about a story that is just a little bit scandalous. It's a story that I almost guarantee you you've never heard before, and I gotta be honest with you, I've never preached this story ever in my entire ministry career. So I'm a little excited about it. But nonetheless, I'm a little bit anxious. As we get started, I wanted to remind you of something that you may or may not know, and it's just a fun little kind of thing that popped up on the internet a couple years ago again, and it really was not anything new. It had been around for about a decade or so before, but it kind of gained its prominence around 2020 or so, not too long ago. And it's this idea that's based on the principle that things that happen in Florida, like the state of Florida, are just crazy. Like the people that live there whether it's true or not, like there's this mantra that the people that are in Florida are crazy. And I know Matt Crossan's not going to like that because that's where he's from, but nonetheless. And so what you would do, that's right, I got a gator chomp from the back. So what it is that you do is you go to Google and you Google search Florida man and then the date, like your birthday is the way you would do it. And then you read the article that shows up, the Florida man on that particular day. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a couple of them that I did. So if you do Florida man and today's date, all right, this is what comes up. A Florida man complained about his neighbor's loud music coming from a car in the parking lot of their Daytona apartment complex. He sprayed 4 of his neighbors with roach spray and swung his nunchucks in a threatening manner while hitting himself. Like, nunchucks. That's interesting there. I thought that since our friend Matt Crossan was from Florida, I might pick his birthday and choose one for Matt's birthday. On Matt's birthday, a Florida man is accused of decapitating a hamster and leaving its body in a box near the road he lives on not long after he purchased it from a pet store. A hamster. Have you ever seen like the menacing hamster? And then my birthday. This is my favorite. If you do my birthday, a Florida man is accused of running around naked, swearing and yelling at people to look at him while in a Chick-fil-A parking lot. A woman called authorities around 1 a.m. saying that he was chasing her boyfriend and, quote, trying to fight him. The woman received a call from her boyfriend who was riding his bike at a Winn-Dixie at 1 a.m. in the morning. Riding his bike at a Winn-Dixie when the man started chasing him. Authorities said, the woman said that when her boyfriend arrived at the Chick-fil-A, he tried to fight her boyfriend and then started to take off his clothes. Now, this is one I actually kind of understand because I'm not a big guy. And I'll just be honest with you, if somebody tried to pick a fight with me, the first thing I'm doing is taking all my clothes off because no one wants to fight a naked man, right? That's if you think I'm crazy, that's it. So anyway, it's interesting if you kind of do this. And Brene Brown, who is from the University of Houston, she does research on psychology and sociology, and particularly around things like courage and shame. She made a statement in her book Rising Strong that stuck with me. She said most people are just doing the best that they can with what they have, meaning that every decision that people make at the time makes perfect sense to them. But come on, like you read some of these stories, some of the things that you've experienced, some of the things that I've experienced, and you just kind of wonder, like, what were you thinking, right? Maybe even you would use the phrase, like, how could you be so dumb, right? Why did you do what you do? That doesn't seem to make any kind of sense. Last week we talked about stories that my grandmothers and my grandfathers shared with me. And my grandmother shared one story when she was a little girl. Her and her brother were playing Cowboys and Indians, which I guess is not a particularly politically correct thing to play anymore. But they were playing Cowboys and Indians, and he was the cowboy and she was the Indian. And he captured her and took her into the barn, the hayloft, and was going to hang her and had the noose around her neck when her dad walked in and found him. And she tells that story, and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen, right? My grandfather destroyed his little sister's tricycle because he and his brother decided that it would be a good idea to ride it off of the roof of a barn. And you just kind of go, what in the world were you thinking? Those of you that are parents, come on. You've uttered sentences with your kids that you never, ever, ever thought that you would have to utter, right? And they say things and they do things, and you're like, what in the world were you thinking? Maybe your parents had to say that to you at some point along the line. Like, why is it that you would do the things that you do? And for most of us, in the moment, it just seems like the right thing to do. It seems like the only thing to do. Now, let me tell you why that's going to hit us in the next series. You see, in the United States of America, we kind of live within this kind of mantra that autonomy is one of the greatest virtues that we have, that I can do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, as long as I don't hurt anybody. And when we live in that type of world and that type of society where all we think about is just what's right for me kind of in this moment, then we see the world kind of descend into this kind of chaos. And this series is going to talk to us about what a world looks like where we kind of separate ourselves from any kind of moral compass or moral standard that might exist in the world. And we just do what seems right to us, and you do what just seems right to you. When we live in that type of world, what is it that happens, and where does it end up? And it's never, ever, ever a good place. And so we're going to spend some time talking through the book of Judges here for the next 6 weeks or so, and to give you kind of some historical context for the way that Judges is kind of laid out. The nation of Israel, remember, they were slaves in Egypt, and then Moses went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go. And they went into the wilderness where God gave them the laws and kind of set them up as a nation. And then under the leadership of a man named Joshua, the nation of Israel would move into the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they'd move into that land, and they would get kind of divided up. The land would get divided up amongst 12 different tribes of Israel. And Israel didn't have any king in that day. In fact, the way that God set it up is that God would be the king over Israel. They would have these 12 tribes that would kind of work together in kind of this loose confederation. But they had a list of laws that they would follow that God had given them. And it was what's called a theocracy. God was going to be their king. And for a period of about 300 years, I think we have a slide to show you. For a period of about 300 years or so, we have what's called the period of the Judges. A period where again, you have this loose confederation of 12 tribes that have a common law that they're supposed to follow. And God would have these judges that would help arbitrate the law amongst the 12 different tribes. And then after the period of the Judges, we see the monarchy when Saul and David and Solomon would come after, and they would unify the nation under a monarchy. So for this period of about 300 years, we have this cycle of the Judges, and it's kind of where we're going to be talking and hanging out for the next 6 weeks or so. And as the nation of Israel was in this period of time, they fall into a cycle. In fact, if we read the book of Judges, what we see is that there's this kind of pattern that Israel falls into. It begins with them being disobedient to God, where they have these laws they're supposed to follow, but for whatever reason they push away from those laws. For whatever reason they don't follow those laws. And because they break away and push and distance themselves from the laws, we see then that disaster shows up, that problems come because they push away from the laws of God. And then they cry out to God, and they cry out for a deliverer, and God would raise up a judge to come and to rescue and deliver his people out of captivity. And what we see throughout the period of this 300 years or so is this cycle happen over and over and over and over again. And today, as we're going to kind of go to the end of the book of Judges, and we're going to see that as we come to the end of that 330 year period, we're going to see just exactly where this cycle would lead the nation of Israel, just exactly what this would lead the nation to. And it's important for us today. It's important for us today because of this. The pattern that the judges fall into, it's the same pattern that you and I fall into, isn't it? Right? We know that God has given us standards by which we're supposed to live. We know that God has given us direction as far as how we're to handle our relationships, how we're to handle our sexuality, how we're to handle our finances, how we're to handle every aspect of our life. We know that God has given us some boundaries, and yet nonetheless, we tend to kind of push away from those in our world. We tend to lean into things like moral relativism, right? Which states that whatever I think may be right may not be what you think is right. And I can do what is true for me and what's right for me, and you do what's true for you and what's right for you, and I'll stay out of your world and you stay out of my world, and we'll just kind of move on. We move towards moral relativism. We move towards situational ethics, which means that it's not right or wrong, because in certain circumstances, what's right may be wrong and what's wrong may be right. And so our society kind of pushes away from the idea that there is a moral standard in which we all should live. And when we push away from that, come on, you know this. When we push away from that, we find ourselves in situations of disaster, don't we? And when we find ourselves in those situations of disaster, what is it we do? We cry out for help. We make a phone call to mom or dad. We make a phone call to the friend. Maybe even we cry out to God. And the cycle of the Judges is our cycle. And today we get to see a picture of where that cycle ends up if we keep in the cycle. Now, before we read the story, I want you to understand the story covers the last 3 chapters in the book of Judges, and because it's such a big section, we're not going to be able to read all of it. But I want to encourage you to go and read the story. It is something straight out of, it's so bizarre and so weird and just absolutely, if we were to make a movie about the last 3 chapters of the book of Judges, it would be NC-17. It is pretty serious. And so for some of you that have younger kids in here with you, you may at certain points want to, earmuffs, but it's in the Bible. This is why you should read your Bible, because this story is actually in there. And you'll see here in just a minute why it makes me just a little bit nervous to be talking about it, but it's here in your Bible. We're going to pick up in Judges chapter 19, and we're going to read starting in verse 1. It says this: "In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in the remote area of the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, and she was unfaithful to him, and she left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there for 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return." Now, I need you to understand, we don't have, well, maybe we do have something similar to concubines here in the United States, but let me explain what it meant by saying a concubine. Legally, a concubine was the property of the man that had her. She had all of the responsibilities and duties of a wife, as you can kind of wrap your head around that, but she had none of the benefits. So any children that the concubine had would not have an inheritance. She would not necessarily have an inheritance. She was simply a piece of property that this Levite had. Now, if you guys have studied the Bible, you know that the Levites were actually the tribe of Israel that became the priests of Israel. They were responsible for serving in the tabernacle and then later the temple when it was built. And so if you can wrap your head around this, you have for all intents and purposes, if we could kind of, it's not entirely the same, but you have a pastor, essentially a priest, who takes for himself, more than likely in addition to the wife that he already has, at least one concubine. And he goes down to Bethlehem, which is, by the way, the city that Jesus was born in, and he gets him the concubine and he brings her home. And what the scripture alludes to is that he was pretty harsh with her. He didn't speak very kindly to her. And it says in the NIV here that she was unfaithful to him. Perhaps that means that she cheated on him. Maybe it just means that by leaving him and going back home, she was unfaithful. But for whatever reason, the marriage that she's in or the relationship she's in with this Levite is bad, and she gets out of Dodge. She's gone, and she goes back to Dad's house down in Bethlehem. Now, obviously, the Levite initially is not super bothered by this because she's gone for 4 months until the Levite finally says, hey, I miss my concubine. I want her back. Perhaps even, we'll find out here in just a minute, his thought was, she's my property. I deserve to have her. I own her. And so he goes back to meet with the dad and to get his concubine back. And so he travels down to Bethlehem. He takes a couple donkeys with him, and he takes his servant with him, and he heads down to Bethlehem, and he meets the dad, and the dad receives him, with great joy, and says, listen, hang out tonight. We'll eat and we'll drink and we'll have a good time. And they do. They stay up all night, carousing and drinking and eating and just having a great time. And they sleep in the next day. And the Levite wakes up and he's hungover. And it gets late in the day. And he says, well, it's time for us to go. And the dad says, nah, don't leave. It's late in the day. You won't make the trip the whole way. Stick around for another day. Eat and drink, and we'll have a good time. And sure enough, again, that night, they pull out the booze. They have all the good food, and they stay up late carousing all into the night. They wake up the next day, same story, right? Hungover and tired. They sleep in a little late maybe, and the Levite gets up to go, and Dad goes, it's too late in the day. Just stick around. Finally, after the third day, we see the Levite says, no, we got to go. I got to get back home to the hill country in Ephraim, and I want to take my concubine with me. And so he loads her up on the donkey, and they make their way north out of Bethlehem, headed back towards the hill country of Ephraim. And as they're making their way, the servant says, hey, we're not going to make it all the way. We should go into this town called Jebus, which is where the Jebusites lived. And we should go there. It's a Gentile city, meaning they're not Jewish, but we'll hang out and we'll spend the night there in Jebus. And the Levite says, that's not a good idea. They're not Jewish. They're not one of us. We should go on and see if we can't find another place to stay. And as they're making their way past Jebus, this is what happens. Judges 19, verse 14, it says this. So they went on, and the sun set, and they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. Gibeah was a town that wasn't that far outside of Jebus, which would be what we count as Jerusalem right now. And Gibeah was a Jewish town, and so they went into Gibeah thinking that we'll spend the night here in this Jewish city. Verse 15, there they stopped to spend the night, and they went and they sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. Now, pause right here real quick for just a second. The hospitality was a big deal in the ancient Near East, especially in Jewish cities. And so when a stranger would find their way into a town, they didn't have hotels like we had or places to stay like we have. They would go into the city square, and someone from the town would come and invite them into their home, make sure they had food, make sure their animals were taken care of. And that was a tenet of being Jewish that was so incredibly important. And so they go to the city square, and no one comes out to greet them. No one comes to kind of bring them into their home. And so it looks like the man and his servant and his concubine are going to have to spend the night in the town square. But late in the evening, a man comes, an old man comes in from the field, and he's actually not from Gibeah. He's from the hill country of Ephraim as well. And he walks in and he goes, hey, is no one giving hospitality to you? And he says, no one has yet. And he says, listen, come be a guest in my house. And so they go to the man's house, and the man feeds them, and the man waters his animals. And while they're there, this is what happens. Look at verse 22, Judges 19, verse 22. It said, while they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. So, pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who come to your house so we can have sex with him." Yes, you read that correctly, right? The men of the city come and they bang on the door and they say, "We want to take advantage of this man. We want to humiliate him. We want to make sure that he knows he's not welcome here. We want to abuse him and use him for our own pleasure to make sure that he knows what we think about him." Look what happens in verse 23. The owner of the house goes outside and he says to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, do not do such an outrageous thing." He says, "Look, he's my guest. Hospitality is a big deal. It will be on me if you did this to him. Don't do it. Let's figure out a way that we can make this work." What do you think he might say to these men about how it is we can solve this problem? This blows my mind. And earmuffs. You may want to do some earmuffs. Chapter 19, verse 24. "Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them to do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. At daybreak, the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. Holy cow, right? I mean, I can't even wrap my head around what's going on. As a dad that has 2 daughters, right, and a wife, like the thought, if something like this were to happen in my world today, I say all the time, right, I may lose the fight, but there's going to be a fight, right? This Levite doesn't even think twice. First of all, the man is so wanting to protect his guest that he offers his daughter and he offers this concubine. Just take them. Don't take this guest. He's my guest. Take these 2 women who don't even have a say in it. Just take them. And the crowd refuses. No, we want the man. And so the man I can only imagine, takes his concubine and he kind of shoves her out the door and shuts the door. And the intention is, or the implication is, that then he just goes in and goes to bed. He doesn't think another thing about her. And what this teaches us is a couple things. Number one, it teaches us that just how important this idea of hospitality was. And it tells us how little value women had. It tells us just exactly what little value these women had in the ancient Near East. He sends her out and they do unspeakable things to her. They let her go at dawn, and she collapses there on the door, at the door, not even able to knock on the door or come into the house. She collapses there kind of on the front porch. In verse 27, we pick up the story. It says, "When her master got up in the morning and opened the door to the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine fallen in the doorway of the house. And with her hands on the threshold, he said to her, 'Get up, let's go.' But there was no answer." How callous is his heart right now, right? How hard is his heart? He's just given her over to be abused in such a way. She collapses and there's no answer. She is dead. She has been abused so much to the point that life has left her body. He walks out and he sees her laying on the threshold and he just says, "Get up, let's go." But she can't respond because she's gone. So the Levite picks her up, he puts her on his donkey, and he takes her home. And all the way there, he's thinking to himself, justice needs to be done. What they did was an egregious, a terrible, difficult thing. We need to figure out a way to bring about justice for my concubine and how I was wronged, he was even thinking. So what would I do? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll write a letter maybe. I'll write a letter and I'll tell everybody what it is that happened in Gibeah. But a letter isn't going to be enough. I need to make sure they understand how bad this was. And so look what happens next. When he reached home, he took his knife and he cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts, and he sent them to the areas of Israel. And everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up. He cuts her into pieces and he sends it out to Israel, and Israel is incensed. We have to do something. So what is it we're going to do? What they decide to do is go up and we're going to wage war against the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 8 and 9 of chapter 20. All of the men rose up together as one, saying, none of us will go home. No, not one of us will return to his house. But now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it in order to decide by casting lots. We will take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000, to get provisions for the army. And then when the army arrives at Gibeah in Benjamin, it can give to them what they deserve for this outrageous act that they've done in Israel. So all of the Israelites got together and they united as one against the city. And they go up to battle against the Gibeonites, but the tribe of Benjamin defend them. And for 3 days, Israel engages in a civil war. And at the end of that war, what happens on day 3 in verse 46 of chapter 20, it says, on that day, 25,000 Benjamites, swordsmen, fell, all of them valiant fighters. But 600 of them turned and fled into the wilderness and took to the rock of Rimmon, where they stayed for 4 months. And the men of Israel went back to Benjamin and put all of the towns to the sword, including the animals and everything else that they found. All of the towns they came across, they set on fire. And so Benjamin rose up to fight against Israel. Benjamin is defeated, and Israel is so frustrated and mad with Benjamin, they kill everybody that's a Benjamite, burn all of the cities, men, women, children, animals, all of them. Only 600 men escaped into the wilderness to survive. Well, now the Israelites feel remorseful, right? Chapter 21, verse 6, it says, now the Israelites grieved for the tribe of Benjamin, their fellow Israelites. Today, one tribe is cut off from Israel, they said. How can we provide wives for those who are left, since we have taken an oath by the Lord not to give them any of our daughters in marriage? Well, a tribe is cut off now. Now we're remorseful for what we've done, right? The rage has kind of subsided. What is it we're going to do? We've got to figure out a way to restore this tribe of Benjamin to Israel, right? So what are we going to do? How are we going to get brides for them? Look at verse 8 of chapter 21. Then they asked, which one of the tribes of Israel failed to assemble before the Lord at Mizpah? Which one didn't go to war with us? They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had come up to camp with the assembly. For when they counted the people, they found that none of the people from Jabesh Gilead were there. So the assembly sent 12,000 fighting men with the instructions, go to Jabesh Gilead and put to the sword those living there, including the women and children. This is what you are to do, they said. Kill every male and woman who is not a virgin. And they found among the people living in Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they took them to the camp in Shiloh, at Canaan. And then they coaxed the Benjamites to come out of the wilderness, out of their hiding, and they gave these women that they just murdered their entire families to these men to be their wives. But the problem is that there weren't enough. There were 600 men. There were only 400 women that they got. So they had a couple hundred more women men that they had to find wives for. So what is it we're going to do? Look what happens next, verse 16 and 17. And the elders of the assembly said, with the women of Benjamin destroyed, how shall we provide wives for the men who are left? The Benjamite survivors must have heirs, they said, so the tribe of Israel will not be wiped out. We can't give them our daughters as wives, since the Israelites have taken this oath, cursed be anyone who gives his wife to a Benjamite. But look, there's an annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebanon. So they instructed the Benjamites, the remaining Benjamites that don't have wives, go and hide in the vineyards and watch. When the young women of Shiloh come out to join the dancing, rush from the vineyards, and each of you seize one of them to be your wife, and then return to the land of Benjamin. And when their fathers or brothers complain to us, we will say to them, do us this favor in helping them. We did not get wives for them during the war. You will not be guilty of breaking your oath, because you did not give your daughters to them. You didn't give them to them. They came and stole them. Now, do you see? It just seems to go from bad to worse, to worse, to worse. And the very last verse in the book of Judges chapter 21, verse 25 says this: in those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. See, here's the thing. All along the way, people said to themselves, what seems like the right thing to do? And they had so separated themselves from the law and the direction of God that they all just did what they felt like was right in their own eye to do. And every step along the way, be it the Levite taking the concubine, the men and their abuse of the concubine, be it him cutting the concubine up and sending it out to the nation of Israel, going and starting a civil war with the tribe of Benjamin, destroying and murdering every Benjamite except these 600 men, then destroying an entire city to give the 600 men wives and stealing the remaining wives. Every step along the way, they asked the question, what is the right thing to do? And it seemed like the right thing to do was just the absolute wrong thing. And when we read this story, we go, what in the world were they thinking? But the end of the book tells us that they had no king. They had no moral compass. They had so separated themselves from the law of God that they just did what they felt was right. Let me tell you why this hits us home today. In the United States of America, one of the best virtues, or one of the biggest virtues, or the most revered virtue is this virtue of autonomy. The idea that I don't need anyone else. In fact, that I can do what I want, when I want, with whom I want, and then we put in parentheses, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone, right? I can do what I want, with whom I want, when I want, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. I can just do what's right for me, and you can do what's right for you, and we don't need any kind of moral compass that's going to kind of guide us. There's some problems with that, and these problems we're going to see crop up through the rest of this series. The first problem is that this tends to only work out for people that have power and money, right? In fact, what we know is that the people that end up getting hurt most by this are women and children and minorities. That when this is the type of world that we live in, and we see this in countries all over the world, that where they separate themselves from any kind of moral compass, women and children and minorities are the ones that end up suffering. And the reality is this other thing that we know from this is that as long as no one gets hurt is really a lie. Because what we know about this way of thinking and this way of life is that someone always ends up getting hurt, don't they? The people that are around you, they end up getting hurt. Your children, your wife, your husband, your parents, your friends. In fact, some of you, your story is a testimony to the fact that decisions that other people made, decisions that seemed right for them to make at the time, they caused inside of you something that you carry with you to this day. You know that when we separate ourselves and buy into the idea of moral relativism and non-absolute truth, when we buy into that, we know that the people that are around us suffer. And ultimately, you suffer because you end up hurting you as well. Well, I don't know your story, but I do know this about you. Your greatest regrets, the thing that you regret the most, began as you wanting to kind of exercise your freedoms, right? And then ultimately you did the same thing that the Israelites did in Judges. You separate yourself from a standard. You find yourself in disobedience. And when you find yourself in disobedience, then all of a sudden you find disaster that's come upon your life. And you didn't manage your money the way that you should have, and now you found all the debt. You didn't protect your marriage the way that it should, and now you're in marriage number 2 or 3 or 4. You didn't protect your family in the way that you should have, and now you don't have a relationship with your kids, you don't have a relationship with your parent, and you live with the disaster of your decisions. And when we find ourselves in those situations, don't we do just like the nation of Israel and cry out to God to deliver us? Cry out to God to fix it, just like they did. So I want to ask you a question as we enter into this series. If you were God, how would you respond if your people acted this way? If you were God, how would you respond if your people acted this way? Do you want to know something? Do you want to know how God responded throughout the book of Judges? Do you want to know how he's responded to his people and how he responds to you? He delivers us over and over and over again. And no matter who you are or what you've experienced, no matter how much rebellion and denying of the law and the ways of God you've done, he's willing to hear us when we return to him. He's willing to deliver us, and he's willing to deliver you. That's what this series is going to be about. To find out more about it, you got to come back next week or tune in next week. But in the meantime, I want us to walk forward understanding that God has given us boundaries in which to live in, not to keep us from something, but because he wants something for us. Let's pray. God, I'm so thankful for your word, and what a crazy story. But God, it's what happens when we separate ourselves from your word and your law. It's what happens when we just do what's right in our own eye, what's right to us. And God, we live in a world that claims to be wise, that moves away from things like absolute truth and moves towards things like situational ethics and moral relativism. And God, when we do those things, we find ourselves descending into chaos. And we have been hurt by it. And we've hurt people around us by it. And we've even hurt ourselves by doing this. So God, I pray that you would give us the wisdom to know what's right as we move forward and the courage to do it. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you guys for coming. We'll see you next week.